Hi, Beth.
Hi, Carrie.
Sorry for the late opening. I got caught up writing an email. There's a situation with zoning board that I'm trying to resolve.
Oh, okay. No,
Yeah.
no worries. No worries. I was just wondering and glad that it's working tonight.
Yes. Did everyone update their Zooms? Because I just got it updated and it looks crazy in a good way, but I was just not expecting it.
Um, I mean, I don't know. Mine, I've had to do that a couple times in the last month or so, but I mean, I probably might have done it with a work thing in the
Mm.
last couple weeks or something, and that's why it didn't happen to me tonight, but it does happen and it changes, I know. And you go in and you think you quickly can get into a meeting, and then all of a sudden you have to go through updating your Zoom and everything. Hmm. Hi, Donna.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Jan. Hi, Scott.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep,
Perfect. Good
you're
to see all
good.
y'all.
Nice to see you too. Um, Bob texted that he's got something and he's going to be a little late, but he is coming, but he'll be a little late. Um, so this is it. So let's open the meeting. It is 7:02 on July 18th. I'm opening the meeting of the Shutesbury Conservation Commission. Call to order, and this meeting is being recorded. I'm glad we can meet. Sorry about meeting last week. That was that was really chaotic and kind of crazy. Um, but it's all right. We
It
don't have a ton of
happens.
it. It does. It happens. And we don't have a ton of stuff going on really. So, it was okay to just move it to this week. It's really fine. All right. So first on our agenda is minutes. We've got minutes that Carrie put together and Jan worked on for June 27th. Um, did everybody get a chance to look at them? Yep. Good. I thought they were fine. I had no edits or changes. So we just need a motion to approve the minutes
I motion to approve the minutes
of June 27th.
of June 27th.
All right. Second?
I'll second.
All right. Con,
Hi.
Rowan,
Aye.
and Wilson. Aye. Great. And Jan was really nice to actually put a set of minutes together for our tiny little meeting last week, which I think is appropriate. We did call to order. We opened, whatever. So she did, and she's going to send that around and we can, approve it at next week's meeting because we are meeting again next week, our regular meeting on July 25th. All right. So then lots of things to talk about. Where'd my list go? Carrie, so those emails about the MACC membership and handbooks. Um,
Yes.
so I was just wondering, how much do we pay for the membership?
Off the top of my head, I oh, it's so for the membership itself, I found this out very interestingly enough. I called them because I wanted to make sure what I was putting down was correctly, but I forgot to ask about the handbooks, which is why I got the email. Um, so it's actually based on committee members and population size. That's what I was told over the phone, which I thought was
Oh,
very interesting. They didn't explain how. I should have asked how, but but yeah.
huh. That is weird. So the you sent them 100 and what you said, $120. And was that just for the handbook? That's not the memberships.
No, so I believe when she was talking about 120 extra, I was including a handbook for each person, including myself. So I believe they were either 20 or 25, and I was going to get a handbook for just to have, so that way when the next if the vacancy is filled, it's going to be there. I don't have to worry about it. So
Okay. Yeah, I
I
think
thought that answered me back, but I've been so caught up in the whole thing with the ZBA that I haven't even had a chance to answer that.
no, it's fine. I was just curious because I think it said it's $20 per person who for each member, for each Concom member. I'm assuming that's just for the handbook and that
Yes.
we also pay membership fees, which I just was wondering what those were.
Yes.
Um,
So when they sent the letter and it had like the full board like from the previous fiscal year. So that's why I was calling originally because we only have 4 out of 5. So I was like, oh, is it different? And they said no, because it's based on commission members versus population, which I did think was interesting.
yeah.
But yeah, I'll follow up with them and get that straightened out.
Okay. Yeah. And we can, yeah, you see, have me included because I'm wondering about just giving them more money so we can get a membership for whoever the staff is. Because that's what she was saying. It costs a little bit more, but I think it might be worth it to have the staff
For the
have a
handbook,
membership
yeah,
and get a handbook also.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and then Scott, those emails with the person from 30 Sumner Mountain Road. It sounds like they're probably going to have to submit an application because there is a wetland, but maybe we do a site visit.
Yeah, actually, I emailed them here. Have they responded? I haven't seen that yet. So they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
She responded. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. She didn't really give though enough info. I still think a site visit would be good. She said that she thought there was a wetland within like 40 feet of
Oh,
um
okay.
the edge, which would mean they would need to file. But a
Gotcha.
site visit's always good. And then what I was thinking you could look into is if there's any restrictions having to do with the conservation land being within 10 feet. I guess she must be in a butter to our conservation land. And so she
Okay.
was wondering.
Yeah, I'm was tied up with meetings and stuff today, but I'll circle around, read the email, and then get with her and see if we can arrange a site visit. I don't know her timeline for that either, but
Mhm.
do we know which conservation parcel she abuts?
Um, I
Or
know, I know we have one on Sumner Mountain Road. I'm not sure the name of it, but I know what she's talking about. We
maybe I
definitely,
can work with Carrie on that to see which parcel and if what exactly we own there.
yes,
Sounds
yes.
good.
Carrie might know, or Morris, and Carrie's on her way out. You might have to actually stop at the office and go through the box.
I can I can do that here at some point.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think just a site visit right now would help. Because if she has to do a wetlands, if there's a wetlands within 40 feet, she's got to do an application anyway.
Yeah.
So that sounds good.
Well, maybe that's the place to start. Is I can connect with her if that's where she's at. There's a wetland proximal. It doesn't really matter if it's conservation land or not. I'm finding it unlikely that we have some sort of um, reservations that would extend off the property that we're responsible for managing. I think it's the wetland issue, and if she's adjacent to that or within the R, then I think it's getting into that conversation. So
Yeah.
sounds good. I'll follow up with her.
Yep. Yep. I agree. And we have a couple other site visits to set up. Time is it 7:09? Yeah, I guess we could talk about this now for 6 minutes. Um, we've got a RDA that's coming in that Carrie's been doing legal ad and everything to get them on our agenda for next Thursday. It's 678 Pratt Corner Road. We did an enforcement there a bit ago. I think most people will remember that. So I haven't read the RDA, but I think it has to do with taking down some trees on that same property. So I was thinking, so there's that site visit. Then there's the Sumner Mountain Road. And then Penny would like us to do a little site visit up to the top of the lake conservation area, which would be great. I'm thinking we do the 678 Pratt Corner Road and the 30 Sumner Mountain Road the same day. And I was thinking of next Thursday, just to keep it in the same day as when we have a meeting, just to keep people like, you know, my life in some kind of order. So if that works out for folks, that would be great. And then the top of the lake, I think it's going to be a longer site visit. So maybe we do that the next week, like what is that? Monday the 29th. It's like one of the afternoons that week. That week we don't have a meeting, so it could be hey Bob. That could be for me, it could be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday time frame. But how does next Thursday afternoon work for 2 site visits? Anyone? Any takers?
I think that would be fine for me. What would be the starting time?
Great. 3:45. Yeah, I thought I would do one at 3:45 and one at 4:15.
Yeah, I can do
Let me check with work on that, but that's a possibility.
Okay. So Scott, when you reach out to that woman, see if next Thursday works.
Sounds good.
Okay.
You're
Are
thinking
you available?
after 3:45-ish, sometime in that neck of the woods.
Yep.
Okay.
Are you available next Thursday?
I am not available here the rest of this month.
Okay. Jan, are you around
I
Thursday?
can
Yeah.
do Thursday, sure.
Okay, great. Scott, do you mind missing the Sumner Mountain one?
No, absolutely not. I really don't think this will revolve around the conservation areas that we manage. I think it's going to be more of the wetland issues and work on the aura is my guess.
Yeah. Yep. I think so too. All right, great. Let's 3:45 Thursday. We'll start at 678 Pratt Corner Road. I'll send a reminder. Next. All right, great. And then we'll work more on the site visit for top of the lake with Penny. I guess a quick update on the because we got a couple minutes. A quick update on the Dudleyville Pond Dam. Remember, we issued an emergency cert, but then DEP had some comments, and then I put together basically conditions that were going to go with the emergency cert, and they look actually very similar to our typical order of conditions because it's a really big project. So I wanted to have more, you know, all the usual erosion controls and all that. And the consultant and DER had a couple comments on those order of conditions. And so we've got those comments, but basically DER is waiting for their funding. They still don't have all of their funding. And so the emergency certs are only good for 30 days. So we're waiting until they actually get the okay with their state funding and they can go ahead with the work to issue the emergency cert that'll be for 30 days. Yeah, and there was a couple other concerns from DEP about who was actually declaring it an emergency. You know, and it's basically the Office of Dam Safety. They just were sort of questioning that we were basing it on a letter that was dated about a month ago. But I think that's all been straightened out. So we're getting there with that. And I'll definitely let you guys know once that's issued and once construction is going to get going. Because I think Jan, you and I talked about we want to definitely do some site visits while that construction is going on. But it's a little delayed.
That's just because we've started a fiscal year. Is that what it is?
Oh, the funding?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, I know of a lot of grants and things that were actually announced this week.
Yeah.
Once July 1st is over. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. All right. If nobody has, does anybody have any more questions on that one? Bob? I think you're muted.
What were the natures of the comments that you received?
Um, One comment had to do with the turbidity curtain. One of the sheets of the Stantec's plan set showed a turbidity curtain in the downstream, in the stream on the other side of Montague Road. And then another one called it a oil boom. And then in the third sheet, which was more the last sheet, which had to do with like grading and seeding, there was nothing as a turbidity curtain. And so one of my conditions had just been, we would like to see a turbidity curtain installed downstream throughout the entire project. And they came back with sort of saying that they didn't, that listing it as a turbidity curtain on one of the sheets was a mistake. And that they don't encourage, and I've seen this before, turbidity curtains in streams with such high volume, because they really just get destroyed and they don't stop anything. So they were talking something a little more flexible, something they can replace really easily, which was straw wattles that were staked in. That's what they were saying for downstream. So that was one comment. The other comment was that the language I put in just describing the project said that they were reconstructing the channel, and they kind of said, and they're right that saying that they were going to actually go in and create a stream channel was almost going beyond just abating an emergency, like dealing with just an emergency. So they just changed the wording a little bit, or asked if I could change the wording to just say, dam removal, and then, but not call, and then dam removal with then sort of channel being created through the removal of the dam. That was all. I think that was it for their comments.
Thank you. I think those are good catches on your part.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. All right, it's 7:18, so we can move on to number 2 on our agenda. 70 Lake Drive. So we're looking at the order of conditions, and I see Mark's here. So I'll share my screen and bring up the order of conditions. So just to refresh everybody, we closed the public hearing at the last meeting, and we're just reviewing the order of conditions tonight and hopefully approving them. Oh, too many things open.
For the record, I'll recuse myself.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Well, you can't yet.
Yeah, right. I'm not good at this. All
Now
right.
we can.
Yay.
Yay.
All right, special conditions for the order of conditions for 70 Lake Drive. All right, the work proposed is within jurisdictional areas of bank for Lake Wyola, land underwater bodies and waterways of Lake Wyola, bordering land subject to flooding, and the 100-foot buffer zone, or the aura, to the bank. And then there's just a description of the project. Applicant proposes to extend an existing deck 5 feet, enclosing a 10-foot by 42-foot section of the deck. Work will include removal of stairs, installation of 4 drilled helical pilings. Construction of the deck extension will sit on both the new helical pilings and old stairwell concrete pilings. No impact to resource areas. Whoops. I say no impact to resource areas, 8 square feet of impact to the aura from the drilling of the helical pilings. There'll be 210 square feet of new roof, which is impervious that will drain to an existing dry well and over existing lawn and garden for infiltration. Natural Heritage. We have received a letter June 6th from Natural Heritage, basically saying that the project is not located within estimated habitat. So that's good. The estimated habitat really goes with the lake, not so much the land next to the lake. Here's the plan. We're referring to the plan. And the rest of this is all our standard conditions. Nothing special. Certificate of compliance. Yeah, these are all standard conditions. And then we've just got bold some of the important stuff. We need to get within 30 days, we need the letter with an original signature stating that that the applicants received the order conditions and understands the order conditions. 30 days, it needs to be registered or recorded at the Franklin County Registry of Deeds. This highlighting will go away.
Hey, Beth, can I jump in for a second with a question?
Yeah, sure. I was just gonna say I did reference here your old order of conditions. That was that comment from Mark Stinson.
Yep, that's what I was
think
questioning.
Yeah, was that your question?
Yeah. So what's the process of getting a certificate of compliance for that?
Did you record it?
I
Order
never
of conditions?
Well, back then we did the orders of conditions. I think we recorded the orders of conditions, but back in 2002, I don't think we ever recorded the issue of certificate of compliance. I don't think we ever knew we had to get a certificate for compliance back then.
Okay, so I had
and so I think Mark's picked up on that and said, okay, he sees the orders of conditions, but he doesn't see the certificate of compliance.
right, yeah, and his comment asked, yeah, if there was a certificate of compliance, and then right at the end he said, was the order ever recorded? So did did we find that order of conditions? And did Carrie send it to you? And do you know if it got recorded? Do we have the recording?
I think it was Carrie did find it.
Yeah.
And I think we recorded it, but I've got to check into that. So I guess that's the first step, is to confirm that we recorded the orders of conditions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to include as a condition here that in addition to recording this order of conditions, I just had the applicant shall provide proof of having recorded the order of conditions for the previous project number. Because yeah, once we get that information, then all we have to actually probably just do is a quick another site visit to look at the work that was specifically under this order. And then you put together an application, a certificate of compliance application, which is just one sheet, submit it with the fee, and then we get that on an agenda to vote on it.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll take care of that.
Okay. So I'll leave that in here just as sort of like a condition of this, is that you provide proof to us again that those orders got recorded.
I kind of think it was recorded, because how would Mark know that if it wasn't if I wasn't at the registry of deeds, how would Mark know about it?
Because all of these orders and conditions get sent to him.
Okay,
You know, I will send him a copy of like this new set of conditions. And he supposedly keeps all that stuff on file, all the notices of intent, all the orders of conditions. And often what he probably doesn't ever get is that things get recorded, because often that info comes to the commission and doesn't end up getting to him.
okay.
So,
All right, so we'll follow. Terry and I will take care of that.
okay. And then this other one is that the certificate of compliance for this order of conditions shall not be issued until the applicant has furnished the commission with proof of having renewed their Chapter 91 license for their dock. So, you know, that's a condition that's not going to slow down construction of the deck. It would just be getting the certificate of compliance after the deck is built and all of that. We would be looking for that.
Sounds good.
Okay. Erosion control should be installed. Notify the commission 48 hours before work begins. And then these are all just standard conditions about erosion control during the work. Standard. And then also when the project's complete, contact the commission for a post-construction site visit. And then stuff about the certificate of compliance. Erosion control, stay in place. That's it. Any other questions, Mark? I know I kind of flew through that, but these are really just all the standard conditions.
Yeah, no, all very straightforward. No problems.
Okay,
Nope.
great. Commissioners, does anybody have any comments or questions?
Not for me.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing then. All right. And if everybody's good, we just need a motion to issue the order conditions for 70 Lake Drive.
I move to issue the order of conditions for 70 Lake Drive.
All right, second.
I second.
All right, Con,
Aye.
Rowan,
Aye.
Bob, I think you have to say you abstain.
Abstain.
Okay, and Wilson, aye. Great. All right, thanks, Mark.
And thank you.
Yeah, we'll get you the paperwork next week at some point. All right, thanks. All right, next on our agenda is we have Donna McNichol here. She is the Shutesbury town attorney, and she's going to talk to us about the comments from the Attorney General that we got on our bylaw. So welcome.
Beth, I don't know how you want me to proceed on this. Did you just want me to go through each section of the letter? Or do you want to ask questions? How would you like to proceed?
Yeah, I was thinking if you had read through it, if you saw any real issues. I have one of them out of however many comments there. I have one that I have a question on. Most of them, they made sense to me. They almost all at the end say, you know, check with your
Right.
town attorney on whatever. So I guess I'm looking to see whether you thought any of it was strange or could cause a problem.
No, but I think it makes sense to just sort of flip through
Sure.
the comments so that the commission, you know, understands. So the first comment is obviously about your fees. And that's a really standard comment that comes out of the AG's office, because there's two kinds of monies towns can collect, two buckets. One's fees and one's taxes. And fees have to have a reasonable relationship to the work that the commission does. So the only thing I would caution you on when you're setting your fees, make sure that they have that reasonable relationship. Carrie's time, commission's time, paperwork, administration, notices in the paper. You know, just make sure that there's a relationship between that. You can't have a order of conditions that costs $3, you know, of your work and charge $1,000. That, you know, that wouldn't make any sense. But as long as there's a reasonable relationship, your fees shouldn't be up to challenge. But that's just the general law, and so it's important for any commission or board to know that. The definitions, the comments on that, I think that the only thing they're trying to point out is that public entity, state agencies really aren't under your jurisdiction. So as you're dealing with issues that on state land, you know, just keep that in mind as you're working through some of that stuff. Sometimes the state's willing to sit down and talk about a project they're doing and that kind of thing. But they're probably not going to look favorably on you issuing an order of conditions that makes them do things they're not planning on doing.
And yeah, and I've had this before. They don't have to follow the bylaw, right? Like the situation in Amherst had to do with a butter notification. I think it was Mass DOT or somebody who they were willing to, I think, file an RDA with us. This was a while ago, and sort of do things maybe that the Wetlands Protection, some of the stuff that the Wetlands Protection Act, but anything that was above and beyond the Wetlands Protection Act, they were like, no, we don't do that because we'd have to abide with every single town that we deal with and whatever. So, because that's kind of what they're getting at then, that they really don't have to follow the bylaw, I guess.
Right.
Okay.
So, I was really interested in the security section, to be perfectly honest. And I think that my main interest in the security section was this idea of negotiable securities. Right? I know that's standard language, and I know it's in most bylaws when you're looking for surety bonds or something of that nature. But I think they're really hard to manage. So I think when you're basically looking for some sort of financial security for a project, a bond or an escrow account, something of that nature makes a lot more sense. And then the other thing that they're trying to point out is that make sure it's set up so that it doesn't go into the general fund. You want to make sure it's under that specific special account so that you can tap into it. But I'll just give all of you fair warning that chasing security bonds, escrow accounts is really difficult. The insurance companies don't like to pay out on them. You know, they're very fussy about when you claim, how you claim, whether it's covered by it. And we can take care of some of that in the language of the bond, making obviously you want to make sure that they're a company that can do that kind of work in Massachusetts, those kind of things, but they're hard to chase. So, you know, making sure that there's good, you know, that the contractors and everybody really understand your order of conditions so there aren't any surprises. So you're not chasing a bond at some point down the road is a lot easier than having to chase those bonds.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they do provide financial security, but they're hard to chase.
And in Little Shutesbury, I mean, it does depend what projects come through.
Right.
Get some big ones.
Yeah. And, you know, so, but that's just, I mean, that's more of a cautionary note, but negotiable securities, you know, I can't imagine trying to chase those kind of things down. Insurance companies, security bonds, escrow accounts, they're there. you know who to contact, you know who to fight with. Negotiable securities is a little trickier. So
What is a negotiable
negotiable
security?
securities are like stocks or, some sort of financial pledge, as
Oh.
opposed to a bond or an escrow account where they put the money in an account, it's held by an escrow agent, and then you notify the escrow agent if they haven't done the work they need to do. And there's an agreement that says if they haven't done it within 30 days, you can get the escrow agent to give you the money to go do the work. So obviously the cautionary tale on all of that is make sure that they reflect the cost of the work, because a bond for $20,000, if it's $80,000 worth of work, is not going to help the town a lot. But it can't be way over. So lots of times if you can get an engineer to hand you an estimate of what the work's going to cost so that you have it, then you have a really good benchmark for what the amount of the bond or the escrow account should be. So that's really helpful in a lot of these situations.
Okay. Great.
Enforcement entry on the property. I think we've been discussing this for years. You need permission to go on people's properties. If not, we need to get an administrative search warrant. There's two reasons for that. One, of course, is the landowner's Fourth Amendment rights. The second thing is any ability to get fines or penalties. If you go on the property and you find a flagrant violation and you want to collect fines or anything of that nature, and you haven't gone on the property legally, the courts won't give them to you. It's that simple. So and administrative search warrants are pretty easy to get. You fill out an affidavit in district court, basically saying there's probable cause to believe there's a Wetlands Act violation. You list what it is, you list how you got the information. And most district court judges will issue them. We've had to get them over the years in a lot of the towns, and the courts are pretty supportive of being able to go in. They're going to want to know the area you need to look at. They're going to want some boundaries for the search warrant, but that's much easier than going on the property, people are saying you didn't have permission, and then either trying to collect fines or do some other work where technically it was a warrantless search. The big exception, of course, is emergencies. And I was trying to think of examples when you may just decide that you need to get in there and you don't have time to get to court and do it, although court takes about 24 hours max. So it's not like it's a long time. But what I thought about was the solar project in one of the towns years ago where they basically didn't do any erosion control, and it was on a steep slope, and the entire project slid into a wetland. And their conservation commission obviously had to act really fast to get in there and stem what damage was being done before they could even issue any kind of order of conditions on how they were going to clean it all up. That may be an emergency where the court would say it was justified for you to go on property without permission or without a search warrant. But it's got to be something that's happening immediately, that you really need to get in there, and that there's a real danger that a wetland will be irreparably harmed or severely damaged to the point where it would be really difficult to correct it before I would ever want you taking that chance.
So this is even for enforcements. Like we get a call that, somebody's got a backhoe and they're digging and digging in a wetland. We can't, because there's the cease and desist portion of an enforcement where you kind of want to get in there and make them stop doing what they're doing. So in that case, as long as you maybe called the property owner first and said something's going on, can we come onto your property? If the property owner gives you permission, you are allowed to go on.
You're fine. And you can go on the property. But if they say, no, you're not coming on my property and you really believe a wetland's being damaged, then you can go in on an emergency basis, but any orders you issue are subject to challenge, anything of that nature, where if you have the time to fill out that affidavit, my name's Beth Wilson, I've been the chair of the Concom, been on the Concom for X number of years. I have this kind of experience in wetlands and conservation commission protocols and processes. I stood on the road on such and such road in Shutesbury, Massachusetts, and saw a backhoe in the wetland digging. We need to get in there and look at it. Court will give you a search warrant immediately. And you can be on that property really fast.
Okay. Sounds good.
You know, and if you need any help with the affidavit or anything, you just have to give me a call. And we can get it done. Informing the police chief. This was so misunderstood at town meeting, and I didn't know what to do with it. Because it was happening so fast. Obviously, the point of this section of the bylaw was that if you had information that other law enforcement officers were coming into Shutesbury to enforce or to search or to investigate, the chief just wants to know, because once you have different law enforcement arms in a community, you want to make sure they can coordinate if necessary. And that was the whole point of this. It didn't have anything to do with, you know, I mean, that was the whole point of it, was just to make sure that the Shutesbury police, if state police or environmental police were coming in to do an enforcement investigation, that the police chief of Shutesbury knows. So once there's officers in her community that are trying to do something, she can give backup if she needs to. She can respond, you know, if questions come in about it. And that was the point of this. It's not really how it reads, you know, that way clearly enough. And so I certainly don't think it would hurt to think about revising the language a little bit to get across that being the point of this, is that when other law enforcement agencies are called to Shutesbury on wetland matters, that the police chief is notified that there'll be other law enforcement officers in the community, because that was the point of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we could change the language sort of expand on, I think, what we're trying to say a little bit, but to go through a whole town meeting to
I
approve
know. But I think
it.
as long as that's how you interpret it, and if you know somebody's coming in, you just let the chief know, so she knows other enforcement officers are in her community. You know, I don't think there's anything else that has to be done. I mean, the way it reads, you know, the Conservation Commission shall inform the police chief prior to any involvement with outside. I mean, if you need to call the environmental police to ask them a question, or call, you know, state police to ask a question or something, I don't see you having to call the police chief on it. And that's sort of the way it reads. I think that what involvement really was supposed to mean was they were coming into town, they'd be in town, other law enforcement officials, and the chief should then know about it in case there's any coordination that's needed. So, that's the way I would interpret it, and that's the way I'd use it. Effective date. We need to fill that in. So,
Grace posted it. She did everything that this says to do, and I believe it's May 30th.
Okay, as long as it was published in that's the last publication date required. That's the date that goes in there.
Yeah. She did all the postings that needed to be done around town and whatnot, and then
all right.
Yep. So
and I didn't know, is there only one posting or two? I can't remember.
Let's see.
I assume we don't have a town bulletin or pamphlet.
It says shall be posted in at least 5 public places in the town. And if the town is divided into precincts,
At
blah,
least
blah,
one
blah.
week apart in the newspaper. So it's
Yeah.
that second week of the newspaper that the date goes in.
Yeah. So she told me she did it all to the book.
Right. All right.
I
All right.
believe Grace.
I
So
mean, no, me too.
yeah.
So those are my comments on the AG's. Does anybody have any questions now?
No, I think you answered my question. Mine had to do with the informing the police chief and what we should kind of do with that. And I think you're right. I mean, we leave it as is and we interpret it sort of as we meant it when we wrote it during the town meeting. If down the road we end up again needing to make changes to the bylaw, I guess I would suggest that maybe we expand on that a little bit to clarify it. But I don't think we need
I mean, I would just change involvement to knowledge that other police enforcement officers will be in the community or something like that, you know.
yeah.
I remember going back and forth, several of us on this call were involved in tweaking that language. We had conversation around it, and it very much centered in on this issue, Donna, that I think this was the intent and what we were trying to make modifications originally to better reflect this intent. And so I do think it's keeping in line with, I think, our interpretation of how we were putting it forward at town meeting.
I just think involvement's too large.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Too large of a word.
Right.
Yep. So yeah, so I guess if we get the chance down the road, if we're for some other reason we're revising the bylaw, maybe we do change that a little
Yeah,
bit.
and then you got to think of the political. It was such a hot button issue for heaven knows what reason. That you may decide that you're just going to interpret involvement as actual presence and leave it at that instead of going back to town meeting and having the kind of discussion that went on at town meeting over that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true too. All right. I don't have any more questions. Any other commissioners? Concerns? No? All right. Well, thank you, Donna.
Well, you're welcome. I'm sorry I didn't stay on long enough to do it last week.
Oh, that's okay. That was
I felt like waiting for a professor. They weren't there in 15 minutes. I'm out of here.
me too. 15 minutes. That's the
Yep.
cutoff.
All right, everybody have a good evening.
You too.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Night. All right. That's great. That makes me feel like our bylaw is sort of final, and it is posted on the webpage and it does have that effective date on it, which I believe was May 30th. So I think we're good. And we can file the Attorney General comments with it and not on the webpage, but just have them with it. And I think we're good. So yay. So now we can move on to the regulations. The regulations. Let me get out of my regulations. So I think I had mentioned kind of looking at Article 1 and Article 3, but maybe tonight actually I'm so busy. Our life goes on that we just do Article 1. That's all right with folks because I do have some changes to it, so there'll probably be some discussion. I guess I should share it, right? Just a second.
Which version are we using?
I think we're going to use the same one that we looked at the last meeting. The one
There was no changes to that.
No, I didn't want to go through. I
Okay.
feel like
That's good.
all of us have really looked at this one,
Yeah, right.
Oh, shoot. All right, this was called the red line version in my file. Um, I think it is the right one, it's just not. Yeah, so this is the red line version, but it's just not showing the red lines. So it's already made the changes, if you know what I mean. Is that gonna work for folks? Yeah. Okay. Um, so some changes were made in here that I was all right with what was changed, because all the changes to this section just reflect the new bylaw and basically take language from the bylaw. Wish I could get this in red line version, but I don't have Word. That's the problem. I can bring it up in Google Docs, but then I think it might look even weirder. So this whole section one, and I don't want to go through everything because we already went through it once, but it talks about the values, it talks about the resource areas that are under our jurisdiction, and any changes that were made between what was voted in and here really just reflect the bylaw. So I'm fine with section 1.6.
I do have a question about 1.72. And
Okay.
this is really just clarification for me, I think. So for example, we're going to go on a site visit there on Pratt Corner Road that they asked you to come and look and see it, you know, what they're doing. That isn't for an RDA. So I guess there's a step that happens before request for determinations if somebody asks.
Yeah, there really is sort of a question of where's, are you talking about like where's the wetland, and if you're in a resource area or if you're just in the aura. So this is kind of people can file a request for determination to find out whether they need to file a notice of intent, is what this is sort of reflecting. And people sometimes do that. A lot of people will just, if they're actually doing work in a resource area, will just jump right to filing a notice of intent. So most requests for determination are for things that are in the aura. And as long as the commission is able to determine that the work in the aura is not directly impacting a resource area, then there's no need to file a notice of intent. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, that's, you broke it down kind of into two parts, and that was part of it. But I guess the other part was even before that, if somebody just has a question because they're not sure, what's going on at all, they can call us and we go, look, is that true?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Most times people aren't sure if what they have is a wetland or not, and they're not sure if the work they're doing is, within 100 feet of a wetland. And a lot of times if we go do a site visit and we don't see a wetland within 100 feet, then we can tell them they don't need to apply. But if there's even any kind of a question, usually for me at least, if there's any kind of a question about an area and we think that it probably is a wetland, then I typically tell the homeowner they need to hire a wetland scientist to come and take a look and most likely delineate the wetland line. So that then once they've got that line, they can determine where their project lies, where their work area lies in regard to the wetland.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course, at that point, if it's not in the wetland and it's in the aura, we can advise them on some of the minor activities for the aura that are in our regulations. That even if you're in the buffer zone, but you're outside, 50 feet, you're between that 50 to 100 feet away from the wetland line, there's some things you can do and you don't have to file anything at all. So again, that would be a discussion we'd have with somebody when they're trying to figure out what they need to submit to the commission.
And this doesn't fit into any of that, but I saw that I think it was the planning board there. I think it was the planning board sent something to you because somebody wanted a building permit. And I didn't see any follow-up on that. So I'm assuming because they're outside of our jurisdiction that you say, it's outside of our jurisdiction or something in response.
I don't recall that. Yeah, if there's definite evidence that there's, say somebody has delineated the wetland and the work that they're proposing, even if it has to go to the planning board, but it's outside the 100 feet, then that's what I would respond, yeah, to the planning board, that it's not under our jurisdiction because it's over 100 feet.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. All right, so section 2, this is where I would like to see some things taken out. For example, if you read 2.2, activities undertaken in a resource area, including the aura or riverfront, have a high likelihood of unacceptable, significant, or cumulative effects upon the resource area, either immediately as a consequence of construction or daily operation. Unacceptable effects from construction can include, but are not limited to, blah, blah, blah. So this really has to do with the aura, the buffer zone and riverfront, and that, this is basically saying work done in those two areas can actually affect the resource areas. Then if you look at 2.4, it kind of says, in reviewing activities within the aura, the commission shall presume the aura is important because activities undertaken in close proximity have a likelihood of adverse effects immediately or due to construction or daily operation. The effects can include. And so a lot of this to me is saying the exact same thing. It's saying work in the buffer zone or in the aura could impact a resource area, and we need to look at that work closely. But I don't think we need to be saying it twice. And this exact verbiage, a lot of the same language, is also in the back of the regulations in the aura section. We have a whole section on buffer zone, on aura, that has a, because these are presumptions, and the aura section, just like, if you look at the back of the regulations, bank has a whole section. BVW and IVW have a section, and each of those sections starts with a presumption section to it, and then it gets to definitions, and then it gets to so this same language about the fact that we need to certainly look over projects in the aura and the riverfront repeats again in the back of the regulations in the aura section. So if you guys are on board, I feel like we take out some of this duplicate language. And all of this is added. None of this was in the version that we voted in. It's not in our current regulations. This is all new language that Miriam added in with her revisions that she did to our regulations. I do like the discussion. She talks about let's see, where was it? Climate change, kind of. There should be some new language having to do with climate change under climate conditions, predicted election project commissions. So like 2.1 I was okay with, but I felt like 2.2 and 2.4 and 2.5 just sort of repeat a lot of this stuff about riverfront and the aura. And then again, both riverfront and the aura have their own presumptions in their own sections in the back of the regulations. So what do people think?
I like the idea of having climate change introduced into the thought process, but I'm very uncomfortable with trying to suggest that we have measures that are adequate for determining, impacts into the future or even at present that are very easy to gauge. I think that's a sticky wicket.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see what it says. When making a decision to approve or deny a permit, the commission shall consider whether proposals have significant values of the bylaw, including values pertaining to climate resilience and greenhouse gas mitigation, such as local temperature regulations, biodiversity, and carbon storage under climate conditions predicted for the lifespan of the project. To address climate change, resilience, and adaptation. Yeah, do we talk up here anywhere about any of that? So the only thing I want to say that, so in 1.5, which are the resource area values, we've got protection of biodiversity and mitigation of adverse effects from climate change, carbon, greenhouse gas storage, and sequestration. So that is all from the bylaw. So we did build it into the bylaw to be something that we would kind of look at and consider when we're reviewing projects. Bob, you have your hand up?
Or I just wanted to follow up on that. So this is a part of the bylaw that's been approved, this 1.5.
Well, these are the regulations, but they're quoting, yeah, they're sort of, because the regulations should really reflect what's in the bylaw. So yeah.
That language is in the bylaw
It is.
regarding the mitigation of adverse effects from climate change.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Get out my copy of the bylaw.
I think to Janice's point, it is very difficult to gauge that kind of activity. We have certain standards for distances and what's a wetland and what's not, but to try and say such and such an activity will interfere with sequestration of greenhouse gases, that's something I think that is a much more difficult thing to quantify.
Yeah. It is.
I was reading it, I think parts of it are easier to quantify. The loss of biodiversity, that part is easier. But I do agree it could be difficult to interpret resilience or adaptation.
I mean, I think it is covered, and I forget exactly what the regulations do further on about replacing trees with X number of trees and so on, like that, where you're um, ensuring shade so that temperature modulation can occur in your, nearby waters. I think there's some things out there, but the way it's written right there, it just makes me kind of nervous. If we have things built in elsewhere that kind of cover what we're talking about, we can say we want these things, and the general spirit of what we're recommending falls into that category. But yeah, it's a little sketchy.
Yeah, well, and it says the commission's decision to approve or deny shall consider the applicant's avoidance, minimization, or mitigation measures, which they should always provide that kind of thing, and how those address climate change, resilience, and adaptation.
Well, I remember reading somewhere that if trees were taken down, they would be replaced with the same kind of tree, for example. I
Yep.
can't remember if it's where that lands now. But for example, I guess the resilience aspect could be used to justify using a different species, where hemlock, for example, might not be the right answer into the future. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the rest of the regulations, we have some things built in that we can kind of use as you know, based on sort of that tree section or other sections of the regulations, we can say we prefer this done because it is in the end a good thing to do with climate change happening, So I guess I'm okay with this paragraph. We can maybe think about tweaking it a little bit, but I'm all right at leaving this in again, because to me it is one of the only areas in the document where there's sort of a presumption that talks about um, climate change. But we can tweak it if you guys want to make efforts to change
Well,
it or
I
change
guess I
them.
have one more concern, and that is every time we see in the second line of 2.1, it says to have a significant individual or cumulative adverse effect. I'm not sure what cumulative adverse effect means. Is that on the particular project, on the particular piece of property, or if the abutters all cut all their trees down and then you want to come cut your trees down, you can't because they did? How are we interpreting that?
Um, a significant individual or cumulative adverse effect. Um, I've seen cumulative have to do with the same property having different projects over time on that same property.
Mhm.
That then, so you know, so if somebody's individual application may be just to take down 3 trees, but then 2 years later they come back with wanting to put a deck up and take 5 trees down. There's sort of a cumulative effect
Okay, sure.
on a
Okay.
resource area. You know, or you could think of it as the work itself, like different aspects of a particular project could cumulatively have an effect. Say there's an intermittent stream, um, you know, and first of all, the project seems to be kind of changing the stormwater drainage around that stream, but the project also is taking down some trees, which will change the temperature of the stream. So like kind of different aspects of the project can have a cumulative effect on a resource area.
But you're still looking at that as the particular piece of property that the owner has control of, not adjacent properties and stuff. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we can be uh, dealing with different properties in that way.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to how do you guys feel about taking some of the repetition out that I see? Maybe you guys don't see it.
I vote for removing any repetition you find.
Bob or Scott, how do you guys feel about that? I just this number 2-2, and then we jump down to both 2-4 and 2-5 seem to me, and then the fact that both Riverfront and the Aura have their own presumption sections in the back of the regulations. It just seems repetitive.
As long as an average reader would be able to uh, find that reference, you know, as they're putting their thing together, I'm fine with removing the repetition.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming if you're really in there reading the regs through your application, you'd be looking at this. You'd be looking at the table of contents, and you'd be like, well, I'm, you know, I'm just in the aura. What do I have to do? I'm only in the buffer zone. So then you find the section on buffer zones, which is, here we go. So there's bank, wetlands, vernal pools, land underwater bodies, land subject to flooding, 100-foot adjacent upland aura. Go to page 40. You find the section on the buffer zone. Let's see. What was 2-3? To prevent research, the commission shall require to avoid alteration if feasible. More alteration is unavoidable. This is about replication. And again, encouraging avoidance, minimization, and mitigation. I mean, that right there, you have that 2-1 to talk about climate change, and then you have this almost general presumption about all work proposing avoidance, minimization, mitigation. Commission shall preserve the aura, the riverfront, and other resources should be left undisturbed. and natural to the greatest extent possible. I think that's a great introduction. 2-4, 2-5, repeat, repeat, repeat. Wildlife habitat study. Yeah. I'm okay with that being kind of upfront. I think that's also discussed in the back end, each section under each resource area. So it says, yeah. I guess I just have a hard time because this none of this was in what we originally approved and what our current regulations are. And I think what Miriam was just thinking was she kind of took like the key points of all of the rest of the document, brought it up front, which, kind of makes sense in terms of this is what people are going to see, but it's regulations. I just don't feel like it's like, it just shouldn't be that long and it shouldn't repeat things. Like, almost all of this stuff is repeated later in the document and she's just bringing it up front. Anyway, that would be my suggestion for that section, is to kind of just take out the stuff that's later. I don't know. Is that what you guys think?
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't. To be honest, I'm trying to look to see it. Is it truly repeated? Where is it incorporated elsewhere? But in concept, I agree with you, Beth. I haven't. It would be helpful just to look through each one to see where it, like as we're pulling it up, is it concisely stated somewhere else?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like writing the introduction to a paper. A lot of times you have to write your whole paper before you go back and write your introduction.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is kind of like that. In a sense, we could get rid of an awful lot of this, but maybe we don't want to do that until we go through the meat of the regulations.
Right.
Star them or flag them or whatever, and just confirm.
Yeah. That's exactly what, that I'm thinking we do, is we'll go through each article, and when we get to these sections, we can go back and say, oh, right, this is where we're looking at the presumptions for bank and the presumptions for the aura, and kind of see if it repeats up front and maybe take it out up front.
Or maybe it could just be like an introduction where, we don't write it like a regulation up here, but more like an introduction. We don't have to write all that stuff out because it is later. But if people are just wanting a general idea, the thing is, it gets to be a slog to read all of this, and that's hard on people.
Right. Well, and also for regulations, at least for me, I think as Miriam said, these are more for us than they are for the applicants. Applicants aren't. And for me, I've used them forever when I need the answer. I need to know what the regulations say. So you go to the regulations and you look it up, and you want the answer to be right there and be clear. And when you do this, when you start repeating stuff in different areas of a document, it makes it more confusing, and it creates a situation where you might say something differently in different places. And to me, that's like just not what regulations are supposed to be. They should be structured, and they should just kind of state, this is the answer, this is the answer, this is, what I mean? So when it gets too wordy, or when you talk about one thing in one place and then talk about it again in another, I just think it opens up for having confusion too. So we should be just careful of that, I guess.
Yep, I agree with that. I also think where the bylaw itself is more general, and the reg should be more clear. Kind of getting the black and white in, interpretation, or step down of the bylaw, or where it's more vague or open to interpretation. That's also unhelpful. So I think we want to. But I agree with what you're saying, Beth. It's not helpful to if you have it written same thing in several parts of the document, and they may be worded differently or may say different things. That would be unhelpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Regulations should kind of get into the more details about things and be very clear. All right, so section 3, exemptions and exceptions.
This is for me again, just to clarify. Basically, the exemptions and exceptions only apply to public stuff. Like when we got new phone poles or something like that. This isn't about individuals or homeowners or landowners, right?
Well, there's the agriculture section.
Right, 3.1.
Oh, 3.1, right. 3.1, right, is really for what do you call it? Like
Public utilities.
yeah, well, that's what utilities. That's the word I was trying to think of. Yes, exactly. Public utilities.
So if we're going to keep something like that, I wouldn't mind having something in there that says that right up front, so I don't even bother reading it thinking I'm going to find an exemption for myself. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's buried in there, but ever hopeful, I look at something and hope to God that might apply to me, and of course it doesn't.
Well, let's see. So there's that's sort of this.
That's 3.5.
Right.
I think 3.5 is more general.
3.5 might apply to private projects. So 3.1 is really strictly public utilities.
So maybe it should just say that instead of existing structures or facilities, maybe it should say public utilities.
I like that. I'm gonna put that in here. Right.
And agriculture is clear. You're either farming or you're not.
Yep. And then emergency projects have their own.
Now, again, is emergency project simply public interest stuff?
No.
So anything any individual is doing, if it has a health and safety benefit, that qualifies.
Right. So we will get to, and you can read through when you want to, Article 5 of the regulations. That's all about emergency projects and how that works. So that's the emergency certification, like what we issued for the dam removal. It needs to be declared an emergency by a public entity. So DPW, the town's DPW, or in the case of the dam, so the emergency certification form, that's one of the lines and one of the requirements to issue an emergency cert is that some sort of a public agency has declared it an emergency. So it's often the Department of Health, like having to do with beavers and that kind of thing. If there's a situation where we feel like it's an emergency, or the applicant or somebody feels like it's an emergency, so there's not time to file an RDA, there's not time to file a notice of intent. We need to get this done, and say it's a beaver issue. Often it'll be the Board of Health that is the one who gets written in. You know, somebody calls the board of health, says there's a beaver problem here, flooding. People swim here, people fish here, people, you know, people are around this area, and there's a beaver dam and it's causing health issues in terms of bacteria or a threat to the road, whatever. It's a threat to the road, it's probably DPW who would be the one to do. Somebody has to declare it an emergency, I guess, and it has to be a public entity, but it can certainly be a private person's property where this is happening.
So is there does it have to be certified before you can take action in that instance or any of those kind of instances? So it's a certified emergency project?
Yeah, it is.
Maybe.
If somebody's got a situation where they need to do something and it's going to impact a resource area, but they think it's an emergency, they don't have time to file an RDA or a notice of intent. They most likely would contact us and we would say, okay, you know, you need to probably talk to Department Board of Health or DPW. Those in town, those would probably be the two that would be the ones who would say, yes, that is an emergency. And then conservation, we can issue an emergency cert anytime. We don't have to have a meeting first. Like as the chair, I have the authority to issue an emergency certification without bringing it to a meeting. That's how somebody would do that.
So would it help to put certified in front of that? Certified emergency projects 3.3?
Sure. I mean,
that's different than somebody thinking they have an emergency and just going and, you know, driving the backhoe through whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it says right there, provided that all conditions and requirements of emergency projects in Article 5 below are satisfied. And Article 5 gets into the whole process, really, you know, like that there is an emergency certification form. And this is how you would go about getting that filled out and approved by the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm just, again, I zero in on that and think, geez, I found a way.
Right. See, the application for
you know.
applications and permits required by the bylaw shall not be required for emergency projects necessary for the protection of human health and safety, provided that all conditions and requirements of emergency projects in Article 5 below are satisfied. I don't know. I mean, if somebody read that sentence, then they'd go, oh, you know, provided that, and then they would go to Article 5 and they would get the whole bigger description about whether or not they qualify, I guess.
I hope. I may be more eager.
So yeah, and 3.4 was in the is in the bylaw. So that got added in. Okay, so then 3.5. I want to say about 3.5. Okay, so what I wanted to point out about 3.5, 3.5 is the minor activities in the buffer zone and riverfront. And so it lists a lot of the minor activities that are in the Wetlands Protection Act, in the Wetlands Protection Act regulations they're considered minor activities. They're in the aura. Most of them have to be, I think all of them have to be over 50 feet from the wetland line, but they're all, you know, they're all basically allowed without an RDA or a notice of intent. And I'm fine with that. What I wanted to point out, because Scott, I think you were the one interested in all this stuff, that we do have in there activities that fall within the definition of 310 CMR 10.022BE are not exempt from the regulations. And that is the one, he is the one that is, I should bring it up, but it's accessory structures to houses and whatnot over lawned areas. So I know you asked me about that recently, having to do, I think, with the 70 Lake Drive.
There are several that come, I mean, we have one right now, the carport that we talked about, somebody, they have a driveway. They just want to put a carport up on their driveway. And so in my mind, that could fall within this exempt activity. It's small enough, uh, and it's converting, in this case, to use a carport example, or maybe we should make it more generic, but it's converting lawn or driveway, um, into an accessory structure. And so it's allowed under the Wetland Protection Act. And I think the question we've gone back and forth on are, that's true, and what would be allowed under the bylaw. And how much of that do we want to regulate? And I think here it's carving that out and saying that's not exempt. And then we're setting a different standard for activities within the first, I think it's 50 feet, and then a size limit. And I did have comments on that when we get to that part. I don't think that's till part 7, but so I'm okay with this worded like in this way. I do think when we circle around to defining what would be allowed, what is truly minor exempt, and or have we specified that correctly in the regs here?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the section where we're saying that we're going along with the minor activities that are in the Wetlands Protection Act, except for that E, the last sentence there. And E is that one that I just mentioned, that and you were just talking about, that's accessory structures. I could read it to you from the Wetlands Protection Act, but so that is my question: is do we want to include E, so we're reflecting exactly what's in the Wetlands Protection Act, or do we not? And I guess I I don't really recall a lot of discussion about why we were taking it out, why it was one that we did not want to include as a minor activity.
Yeah. Well, because I was the one arguing to have it mirror the State Wetland Protection Act, and
Right.
I think I was in the minority here. But I think to argue the other point, I think, and there's a valid point to be argued on the other side, which is, well, ultimately we may still allow for those types of development to occur. We have additional protections in our bylaw that are more stringent than that of the state. We've protected the aura as a resource area. And so allowing for these types of minor exempt activities to occur within the aura may go against the spirit of what we just approved at town meeting for the bylaw. And and maybe you wanted to set a different standard, and I just pulled it up. I think it's later on where they get to, I think it's 7.68, and they talk about no more than 120 square feet. So that we've come up with a different standard there in these regs. So we're still allowing for some conversion. We're just saying it has to be smaller, less than 120 square feet, and it also has to be in the outer 50 feet of the aura. So we could all discuss whether or not that's the right measure to have here, or if we just wanted to adopt the standard laid out in the Wetland Protection Act. But that's how I understood it. I think folks were
Yeah.
interested in defining it a little bit more specifically, maybe regulating these a little bit more than what was provided for the Wetland Protection Act.
Yeah, so basically, I think, yeah, we decided to have it not be exempt here, but then under the small projects section of the regulations, we do talk about sort of similar projects where they're small in size, and then people can submit a small project application instead of an RDA or an NOI, and that's a pretty simple process. Simpler process.
I think the other channeling those who had a kind of maybe a different opinion than I did. I think they also felt that this was a good service to the town too. That will take someone who's interested in doing a project and it's close to a wetland, but it's converting existing grass to a structure or something similar, that this they may not always know if they're how close they are to a wetland and what the impacts could be, and not automatically exempting it as a minor exempt activity, but facilitating that site visit from commissioners to walk through with applicants would be of benefit to the applicant to help them stay compliant with the Wetland Protection Act and the bylaw both. And so that was the other, I think, if I were to kind of arguing against my previous argument, I think those are the other things that were
good job
brought up.
arguing against yourself. I like that.
But I mean, for my own part, when looking at it, I was just thinking through, for all the work that we do, going through and looking at these types of projects, more often than my belief is more often than not, we end up looking at a lot at some projects that really are minor exempt activities. They don't have the impact on wetlands, and we end up approving them regardless of whether or not we do a site visit or not. So maybe it's a moot point. It's really about time of the commission spent going around and looking at these projects. Right. And then the applicant having to coordinate with us too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I just looked up that E 310 CMR 1022 BE, and in there in the Wetlands Protection Act, things have to be over 50 feet also. So the 50 feet is both in the Wetlands Protection Act and in, I guess you were saying, in our small project provision. Anyway.
I think the only restriction that we have in addition is we say it has to be smaller for the small projects. It has, right now as drafted, we say that it has to be less than 120 square feet. And I don't think the same provision is in the Wetland Protection Act.
No, yeah, you're right. You are right. Let's see.
Oh, I'd love to hear, I mean, Jan or Bob have thoughts on that. I mean, you all weren't, and Beth too, but I think Bob and Jan were part of those conversations when we had them originally too. So they may have thoughts on it that are different.
The only thought I would have is when we get to that section, maybe we can double back and make sure, however we're interpreting that lines up and feels good then.
Mm-hmm. Any comments, Bob?
Yeah, no, just trying to parse it out. So is a potential for any sensible or significant cumulative effects in the resource area during constructions. I think we as a board would kind of know what's what. but it does leave a lot to a judgment call, I guess it would be my comment on it. But I don't know how to, but I think that's probably okay because we good judgment.
Okay. I agree. All right, well, um, we will double back on, I think, a
Yeah.
lot of this front section when we're in the more detailed.
Well, ultimately, Beth, where I landed on that is I I think the way it's worded is good. I, I can understand the benefits to taking out that part E from the exemptions, and then I think dealing with it in the small project section is a good way of going about it, and I think we can talk about it when we get to that part. So I'm just to be clear, I kind of gone back and forth on this one, but I'm good with the way it's worded as is.
All right, sounds good. And then the rest of this stuff, there were not any changes to be, I think. Yep. Yeah, look at that. We got through Article 1. And I think we are skipping definitions and coming back. And I think I mentioned this before. I'm a little bit of a fan of taking definitions out and putting them in as an appendix. That way, if somebody comes, if it is an applicant who does take the crazy idea of going and looking at the regulations, they've got their table of contents, and they hopefully go to the sections that they want to go to, but they read that section 1, and it's a good sort of introduction to what our jurisdiction is, what our values are. Here are the exemptions. And then it should jump right into, I feel like, section 3, but again, we can talk about this, but just taking all these definitions out of just, they're sort of sitting right in the middle of the document. I've seen it in other towns where they'll take it out and put it in the back, but anyway, I think that's it for tonight. Is that all right if we move on for section 3 at our next meeting?
I'd be okay with that.
Great. Me too. So let me just make sure we talked about what we needed to talk about tonight. So we're gonna have site visits next Thursday, 2 site visits next Thursday, and a meeting next Thursday, the 25th. And then I'll send an email after talking with Penny and finding out if the 29th or someday the week of the 29th would be good for the top of the lake conservation area field trip. Are you available that week, Scott, since you're our conservation area man? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Which week were we talking about?
That's Monday, July 29th.
I will be. If we could kick it back to August, I'll be available. I'm sure I can find time, but I won't be available until then.
You're away. Okay. Yeah, I'm away the first week of August, August 3rd to the 10th, I guess. So I'll tell Penny that it would be probably that second week of August. And, I don't think there's a real time frame for this.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll check in with her and let you guys know. But, all right. That's all I have. Let me stop sharing.
For coordinating for the site visit for next Thursday, you're thinking to look at the carport would be at about 3:45.
4:15. I was thinking of meeting at 678 Pratt Corner Road at 3:45.
Okay.
And
so
then going to that second one. Yeah, I was thinking 4:15, about a half hour for a site visit.
Okay. I'll write it back. I'll copy it.
Awesome. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah, right. That's right. Get in touch with her. That would be great. Yeah. All right. That's all I have. Motion to adjourn.
Oh,
I'd like to,
motion.
I'd like to make it a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I second.
All right. Rowan,
I.
Douglas,
Hi.
Khan,
Aye.
and Wilson. Aye. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Night, Gary.